Mr. President.
Senator from Florida.
Mr. President, I ask that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I'm here to talk about two separate topics today. The first is the Zika virus, and I'm encouraged that in the last 24 hours we finally seem to have found some action here in Congress in dealing with the Zika virus, as we now have not one but three separate proposals that are going to be introduced to deal with Zika, proposals that we'll continue to work on and debate next week. It was about 5 weeks ago that I met with federal, state, and local health officials in Miami and came out in support of the President's emergency funding request to deal with Zika. Since then, I've come here to the Senate on numerous occasions to call for action. I've stated my belief that there shouldn't be anything divisive about this. Zika is a public health emergency that will, sooner or later, impact the vast majority of the United States, because this is a virus transmitted by mosquitoes that are only going to become more prevalent as the weather heats up. And because our people routinely travel to and from the island of Puerto Rico, the most impacted community in the entire United States. When I spoke here yesterday, the count of people infected in Florida stood at 109. Since then, just 24 hours later, it's become 112. 112 Zika cases is the most of any state in the Union. Of the 3 new cases in Florida, 2 were in Volusia County and 1 was in Orange County. I've said repeatedly that Congress should not allow politics to delay action on Zika. One issue we've been encountering is the desire to offset the spending. And I've made it clear that if we can offset the spending, if we can find the money somewhere else in the budget to pay for what it's going to cost to deal with Zika, we should do it. But that in times of public health emergencies, just like natural disasters, we shouldn't delay acting while we figure out and try to agree on what we're going to cut from other parts of the budget. Another issue we've encountered is whether we do this through the normal process that's going on or fund it as an emergency spending bill. Again, I'm open to either one of these approaches. But back in the real world, people infected by this and their families that have already been impacted by this, they don't have the time for us to figure all of this out. They just believe, as I do, that we need to get going here and get something done. I've said that we should deal with this issue fully, and that the $1.9 billion requested so far may not even end up being enough when it's all said and done. But I believe that there is no one here who wants to get caught in a situation where it's August and people are back in their states, maybe even campaigning for re-election, and they have to scramble back here in the middle of the summer to come up with solutions when it gets hotter, when there are more mosquitoes, and when the conditions are ripe for more people to be impacted by Zika. And that's why I commend others. I commend Senator Nelson, my colleague from Florida. I especially commend Senators Murray from Washington and Blunt from Missouri and others who are taking this seriously, and they are trying to come up with a solution and a way forward. Because this is indeed a devastating disease. It's taken lives throughout our hemisphere, and the way it impacts unborn children alone should call us to action. So let's deal with this now and let's protect our people. There's no reason every proposal to address Zika cannot be bipartisan and earn broad support. And I'm hopeful we can reach a final outcome that fully addresses the problem. I'm hopeful that we'll see some meaningful action on the Zika public health emergency very soon, including the American citizens in Puerto Rico who have been most impacted so far. And that's one reason why next week I plan to introduce, along with my colleague from Florida, Senator Nelson, an amendment to provide the full $1.9 billion request to fight the Zika virus. The strain on Puerto Rico's health system from Zika must be addressed, and this is the only proposal so far that tries to fully deal with the unique challenges that Puerto Rico faces with the Zika virus. I think it's important to remind people who are asking themselves, why should we care about Puerto Rico? Well, I would remind them that 4 million U.S. citizens live there, that the first American to lose their life to Zika lived in Puerto Rico, that Puerto Ricans routinely travel to the continental United States, to Florida, and New York especially, and that these 4 million Puerto Rican citizens have no voice here in the Senate, and so I will make sure that they are not forgotten as we work on solutions to this virus that has disproportionately impacted these Americans. And so when we return next week to continue debating appropriation bills, I hope we can come together on this issue. I hope we can find a way forward that deals with these issues fully and that helps us stop this disease in its tracks and that saves lives. And so I urge my colleagues here in the Senate and the House as well to look at the proposal that Senator Nelson and I will introduce, to offer their input, and ultimately to sign on and get this passed. Because as we know, it's not going to be enough to see progress here in the Senate. We need the House to act as well. And I hope we can start doing that next week. We need to act. Zika is taking lives, it's hurting unborn children, and this problem is only going to get worse as we move forward.